He had already killed before. He had already proven what he was capable of. But in 2010, the justice system gave Curtis Clinton another chance, a chance he should have never had. Just 2 years later, that decision would cost 3 innocent lives.
The trial began today for an ex-con charged with killing a Sandusky mother and her 2 children 6 months after getting released from prison.
On September 8, 2012, in Sandusky, Ohio, 23-year-old Heather Jackson and her 2 young children, 3-year-old Selena and 18-month-old Waylon, were found murdered in their own home.
I have 2 little ones the same age, and I couldn't even imagine what happened here.
Heather had been strangled, her body left in a horrific state. But the most disturbing detail, her children weren't spared. Clinton didn't just take their lives, he tortured them first.
The DNA that matched the defendant's profile.
Police didn't have to look far for a suspect. Curtis Clinton had been in and out of prison for most of his life, including a 13-year sentence for a previous murder. And despite that, he was allowed to walk free, free to repeat his crimes, free to destroy another family. This time, there would be no second chances. How did a convicted killer manage to get released, only to commit even greater horrors? And why did no one stop him before it was too late? This is the story of how the system failed Heather Jackson and her children, and how Curtis Clinton became the monster that never should have been freed. Curtis Clinton had always been a violent man. His criminal record stretched back decades, marked by violence, intimidation, and brutality. Before he became the monster that brutally murdered Heather Jackson and her 2 children, he had already proven what he was capable of. The system had seen it firsthand, and yet it still set him free. In 1997, Clinton was convicted of murdering a 23-year-old woman in Toledo, Ohio. The details of that crime were chillingly similar to what he would later do to Heather. He had strangled his victim, leaving her lifeless body behind without a shred of remorse. It was a brutal, calculated act, but despite the savagery of his crime, he was sentenced to just 15 years in prison. He wouldn't even serve that full term. Clinton was released in 2010 after serving only 13 years. He had been given another chance, one that his victim never got. For many, parole is a chance at redemption, an opportunity for those who have served their time to reintegrate into society. But for Curtis Clinton, it was nothing more than a ticket back into the world of violence and death. Within months of his release, Clinton was already proving that he had not changed. He returned to his old ways, quickly becoming entangled in violent encounters and criminal activity. There were reports of intimidation and threats, and there were whispers that he had forced himself on women. He was the same predator he had always been, just wearing a different mask. But despite these clear warning signs, nothing was done. The justice system had washed its hands of him, and no one was watching closely enough to stop what was coming next. By 2012, Clinton had moved to Sandusky, Ohio, a quiet city known for its family-oriented neighborhoods and tight-knit community. For the people of Sandusky, Clinton was just another man trying to rebuild his life after prison. They didn't see the darkness beneath the surface, the violent urges bubbling just beneath his skin. No one knew that a killer had just moved into their town. And then he met Heather Jackson. Heather Jackson's home in Sandusky, Ohio, was supposed to be a safe space, a place where she could raise her children and build a future. She had no idea that on the night of September 8, 2012, she would come face to face with a monster who had already taken a life before. Clinton attacked Heather first, overpowering her and forcing himself on her in an act of brutal sexual violence. He was larger, stronger, and fueled by a sadistic need to dominate. Heather fought back, but Clinton was relentless. After sexually assaulting her, Clinton wrapped his hands around her throat and strangled her until she stopped breathing. But Clinton wasn't finished. Heather's 3-year-old daughter, Selena, and 18-month-old son Waylon were still in the house. Two small, innocent children who had no way of defending themselves. If there is any shred of humanity in a man like Curtis Clinton, it was nowhere to be found that night. He raped Selena, the 3-year-old little girl, before strangling her to death, just like her mother. When he was done with Selena, he turned his attention to Waylon, the baby boy who had just learned to walk. When Clinton finally left that house, 3 people were dead. A mother and her 2 babies, gone in the most brutal way imaginable. When Heather's mother entered her home the next day, she discovered the unthinkable. Police arrived at the scene and immediately suspected Heather knew her killer. There were no signs of forced entry. The name Curtis Clinton quickly came up. He had been seen around Heather recently, and his violent past made him an obvious suspect. Then, a 17-year-old girl came forward with a shocking revelation. Clinton had raped her at knife point just days before the murders. That was all police needed. Clinton was arrested, and DNA testing confirmed he had been at the crime scene. There was no doubt he was the killer. In 2013, Curtis Clinton stood trial for the murders of Heather Jackson and her children. The DNA evidence, witness testimony, and the brutality of his crimes made it impossible for him to escape justice. The jury took less than 3 hours to find him guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to death by lethal injection. Even as he was sentenced, Clinton showed no remorse. He sat in the courtroom, emotionless, as if he hadn't just taken 3 innocent lives. For Heather Jackson's family, justice had been served, but the pain never faded. The case became a symbol of a justice system failure. Clinton should have never been released after his first murder. But Heather and her children never got a second chance. Curtis Clinton was given a second chance. Heather Jackson and her children never got one. Their lives were stolen by a man who never should have been free. This case is a horrifying reminder of what happens when the system fails. A violent killer was let back into society, and 3 innocent lives were lost because of it. Thank you for watching. If you found this case as shocking as we did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new case. Let us know in the comments. Do you think justice was truly served? Until next time, stay safe.